education. So I welcome you all once more. And trust me, today's session will be very insightful. There's so much to learn. Our facilitator here is one that you gain so much from. So I just want to just sit back. Please just follow through, engage, ask questions if you have questions, and please just follow through every session of the program. It promises to be a very insightful one. Okay, firstly, we are going to take the welcome address, and then I'm sure when you step into this building, you are amazed at how beautiful this place is. Who is testifying to that? It was beautiful. You are amazed at how beautiful this place is. So you're going to be hearing about, this is the African School of Economics. So we're going to be taking the welcome address now, and we'll have someone tell you about the African School of Economics, and that's our Director of Communications, Mr. Obina. Obi, please put your hands together, please.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So on behalf of the African School of Economics, ASE, I would like to welcome all of you to this event. So ASE is a system of Pan-African universities committed to creating a pipeline of African scholars, researchers, and policymakers who will close the representation gap of research produced on African challenges by Africans, and drive the production of effective, intrinsically sourced solutions for the continent's development challenges. ASE's campuses in Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria provide undergraduate and graduate degrees to produce high-caliber graduates, supplying the continent's intellectual and leadership human capital needs. ASE's flagship campus in Abuja aims to create inroads for setting up a robust network of ASE campuses across the country. We at ASE Abuja are very pleased on this occasion to host Dr. Oyebola Okunogbe, one of our foremost affiliated researchers, for what is doubtless going to be a highly utilitarian session for yourselves, early and career researchers. Once more, I bid you welcome and encourage you to explore the other ways that the African School of Economics might be beneficial to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Welcome once more. Please, you can read more about the African School of Economics by going to www.africanschoolofeconomics.com. All right, so I'm going to introduce our facilitator and we get down to it. We have Dr. Oyebola Okunogbe. Dr. Oyebola Okunogbe. Okay, so Dr. Oyebola is an economist in the World Bank Development Research Group, working in the intersection of development economics, public finance, and political economy. She is also an international research associate at the Institute for Fiscal Studies and an advisory committee member of the Nigerian Tax Research Network. She explores different aspects of the relationships between the state and citizens and implications for economic development in low-income countries. One major strand of her research is taxation. She's interested in understanding determinants of tax compliance in context with limited state capacity. She also examines how increased use of technology affects tax systems. On the expenditure side, she's interested in understanding ways to improve public good provision and service delivery. She also works on other topics such as national identity and interethnic relations, gender, and education. She received her bachelor's in economics from Dartmouth College, an MPA in international development from Harvard Kennedy School, and a PhD in public policy from Harvard University. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, let's welcome our facilitator, Dr. Ogbe. Hope I got that right now. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Praise. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me well? Can those online also hear well? You can give a thumbs up if you can hear online. I want to be sure we're not leaving anyone out. And I've put up the slides. Okay, you can see right there, perfect. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. I've been collaborating and working with ASC now. I think it's been almost 2 years, but it's my first time actually being here on this campus, this beautiful campus here. And just want to thank the leadership of the organization, both those that are present and also those that are not. Our fearless leader, Professor Leonard Wanchakon, and other team members that have been working day in, day out on different projects. Okay, so here, I believe that everyone who has come here today, you're either an aspiring economist or an early research career, and I'm going to structure the time today into 2 buckets. So the first one will be a presentation that I will give, and I'm aiming for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to have another 30 minutes for questions, because I think that what will make this session most useful to you is to hear the questions you have, the barriers that you think you're facing, what advice you might need on specific things, and then we can move from there. So here's how we're going to run this. So up number 1 to 6 is the things I'm going to present. Many of them are just one slide, so don't worry that it looks long. And then number 7 is the questions and answers. So we just had the welcome, and we're going to have a few more introductory points, and then going to understanding what exactly economists do. Then I'm going to present you some findings from one project that I've worked on that I think would be of interest to everyone in this room. And then there's a big question: should you do a PhD? That's, I think, a very important question everyone has to answer. And then next is, if you have decided, yes, you do, what does a successful application look like? Then I'm going to go through selected resources, both in terms of preparing for PhD in economics applications, as well as work, fellowship, internship opportunities at the World Bank and other organizations. So this is the run through of what we're going to do today. Okay, so I want to know who we have in this room, and also those online can also share. So there are 3 groups of people I think might be here. There's always other. For those of us that do service, you always have to put the other response in case people don't fall into these 3. So let's just forget the other specify option, but let's look at these 3. So number 1, you might be here and you say, I am curious about a research career in economics. I'm not sure whether it's for me, but I'm here to learn more and to explore and to see maybe it's something I want to do. That's category 1. Category 2 are the people that will say, I'm pretty sure that I want to pursue a PhD in economics, and I'm here to learn how, like what's the next step. And then category 3 are people that are saying, I'm already a researcher in economics, or I'm already in a PhD program, or I've recently completed one. So I want to know, with a show of hands, both here and online, how many people are in category 1, 2, and 3. So let's start with the category 3. If you're already in an economics PhD program, or you've recently completed one, show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we have 8 people here. That's wonderful. Let's go to number 2 now. People who are sure they want to pursue a PhD, but they're here to just get more information on how. Okay, so I think we have slightly larger. What about the first group? You're curious, but you're not sure, you want to learn more. Let's see who's here. Okay, now what about other? You don't fall into any of these categories. Because there's some people that didn't raise their hand at all. I'm keeping track, because are we covered? Okay. I think this is going to be helpful to me to know how much time to spend on each of these things. That's why I wanted to know. Show of hands. Let me see what's going on online. Okay, so we have some number 1s, some number 2s, mostly 1s actually online. Okay, some 2s as well. Okay, that's useful. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so now let's see, what do economists do? And here's a question. There are 10 topics I've listed on here. Can you see? Can you read from that far? Okay. So there are 10 topics I have here. And I want people, I'm going to ask you for how many of these 10 you think that people study in, like economists study for their research. So I'll read them out just so that everybody can hear. Exchange rates and interest rates, taxation, corruption, labor markets, gender violence, education, religious and ethnic discrimination, health, like physical health, mental health, climate change. So these are 10. And I'm just curious how many people, how many of these 10, you look at the list very well to just say, in your own opinion, how many of these 10 do you think that economists study? The first 3, so exchange rates, taxation, and corruption? No. On labor markets, exchange rate, taxation, labor markets, okay. Climate change, that's a very upcoming, so maybe 4. Who else is wanting to give a guess? Somebody's online answering. iPhone. I'm not sure who iPhone is. There's somebody called iPhone online who thinks they do all 10. Another person, John. If the people online are saying everything. Oh. The online people are very Abba Tofa is saying, okay, exchange, taxation, labor market. Okay, so obviously this is the trick question. And I would say that the first 3 that you mentioned are the kind of very traditional topics that we think of as economists. So, exchange rates, interest rates, taxation, labor markets, jobs. Those are very big topics. Climate change is another important one. But in actual fact, all of this are fair game for economists. They don't, nobody is above even anything. Arts, religion, economists put their mouth in everything. Economic history, they have something to say about everything. And in fact, I always tell people when they hear an economist and they want to ask me about interest rates, I say, I don't know anything about interest rates. Obviously, if it's exaggerated, but there's so many areas in economics that people study. And so the macro topics are the more popular ones that people know, but all these areas, and why is this the case? It's because economics, what it does is really giving you a set of tools that you can use to study a whole variety of things. And, I did economics. I went to school in Ibadan, secondary school. It's how you use limited resources to meet unlimited ones. I think was the standard definition we got then. But when you think about this more carefully, it's really thinking about how people use their resources and how they respond to incentives. At the end of the day, it's about human behavior. So when people have constraints, how do they respond to those constraints to maximize the welfare? So anything that has to do with how people adjust their behavior or how they behave in the face of constraints to maximize welfare is falls, I think, very broadly under economics. And many times the goal of the research is to inform policy. And more these days, there's a lot of emphasis on causal identification. And by this, I mean that it's not enough for us to say that, oh, the A happened and then B then happened. Say, for example, the government declared a policy that there is now going to be free education. And then we say, we want to know what impact did that have on people. We can't just say, then more people went to school. No, even without the free education, the enrollment in school was going up before. So how do you distinguish which impact came from the free education from the one that would have happened anyway? So there's a big field in economics that's really focused on this idea of causal identification. And I think this is one of the areas where we need to push more and more into to think about how to be at the frontier of these types of studies. So I have here a link. Actually, I'm not sure how this works. This is just from the AEA, the American Economics Association. I don't think we need to go into it. That just describes what economists do and all of that. But given the ratio in the room, I thought we would have more in category 1. I was going to go a bit more into this, but since we have mostly 2s and 3s, there's no, I don't think we need to go too much into that. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a deep dive into a specific project that I've done, just to illustrate to you the process. And I'm not going to present this in the regular way I would have done it. I'm going to try to talk you through what I'm doing at each step so that you can also just see why I'm doing what I'm doing as part of, I guess, training and also presentation or presenting economics research. So this paper is titled, "Does Exposure to Other Ethnic Groups Promote National Integration?" And it is forthcoming at the American Economic Journal, Applied Economics. So what I would do, I mean, this same presentation I'm going to do in about, less than 10 minutes. I do it for 1.5 hours, depending on like when I'm invited to seminars. So what I'm going to really do here is to extract the most important things. And so I've put all of this on one slide that I would normally have walked through in like 45 minutes. But the important thing you have to, whenever you have the research presentation, is you have to explain the motivation, like what led you to want to study this thing? Why is this an important topic? Why should we care? Because until people know why you care, then they're not likely to really listen to you. Now, I know that we are in Nigeria now, and issues of ethnicity, nation building, religion, we know all the frictions that it can cause. So I don't need to belabor these points. But normally, if I'm talking to a general audience, like international audience, you have to have people really understand, what the realities that we're dealing with and why programs like NYSC are really important in our context. So motivation, nation building is an important goal in multiple countries. So it's not unique to Nigeria. As you probably know, many African countries were demarcated, the borders were demarcated such that it lumps people from different groups together in one. And they have to find a way to exist together, to build a nation together, even though they have their own primordial loyalties to their either religion or ethnic groups. And there's research that shows that countries that have high ethnic and religious diversity, it's often linked to negative social, political, and economic outcomes. So this is just existing research. And so the countries now have to think about different types of policies that they can use to promote nation building. And there are many things countries do. Sometimes they change the capital from the periphery to the center, like we did in Nigeria from Lagos to Abuja. They could introduce new languages for instruction in schools. Sometimes they change the curriculum. They introduce national symbols. One of the things many countries also do is national service. So they usually target young people that are supposed to be the future leaders and spend time moving them to different parts of the country so that they can experience what other people are, what the culture of other people are. They can broaden their horizon and their minds. And in fact, even just globally, there are about 73 of these programs. So it's not just Nigeria or Africa, but globally this happens. Even in the US, we have things like Teach for America or AmeriCorps that sends people there. It's not compulsory, but it's voluntary. Nigeria's one is compulsory. So typically I will have another slide now that describes what NYSC is to the audience, but clearly we don't need to do that. How many people here have served? Okay, and if you haven't, then maybe you're still in uni and then you're getting ready to. So we all know what NYSC is. And so what I'm going to use is the context of the NYSC to ask the question that what is the impact of temporary relocation to another ethnic region on the attitudes and actions of people that are important for national integration? So we know that there are different components of NYSC. The specific one I'm going to be looking at is the fact that they've moved you from one state to another. And the approach I'm using is the randomized assignment of NYSC participants. So this field work was actually done back in 2015. I developed a partnership with a university in Southwest Nigeria, where I was conducting an alumni survey for them. So all their graduates that had graduated, so it was a Yoruba state, in a university in a Yoruba state. And so what I did was I treated their people who were sent to serve either in Oyo, Ogun, Ondo, Ekiti, Lagos, the Yoruba majority states. The idea is that they, even though you can't serve your home state of origin, like, for example, I am from Oyo State, they could have sent me to Osun. Oyo and Osun used to be one state before. So culturally, I'm still among people that are very similar to me. So for those people, I'm thinking of them as a control group. The treatment group are people that are sent to serve in a non-Yoruba state. So they send you and they just send you to Jigawa or they send you to Abia State. Those are the treated people. And I'm using this language from the randomized control trials, which I'm guessing some of you might be familiar with, but you can just see the two comparison groups. And then obviously there's some people that would, maybe they influence their posting, so their posting was not random. And so for those people, I'm not including them in the sample. Or the people where maybe they were first sent to Abia State and then they found their way to go to a different state. So those are two categories of people that I use econometric tools to deal with. I use an instrumental variable, but to use your state of assignment as an instrument for the state that you actually served in. For those that are interested, all of those details are in the paper, which is available online. So that's the approach. Now the data that I use, first, administrative data from the university. So these big reams of paper, I don't know if you've seen them, that shows where each person is posted to. White and green reams that they will post the posting. So they gave all of that to me. I had to digitize all that data. So that helped me to know the demographics of the students, their state of origin, and then where they were sent to, and other demographic characteristics. Then they also gave alumni records so that we could try and do a phone survey with these people. This was now 7 years after they had finished NYSC. So we had to track them down to all over the country, in fact, all over the world, but most were still in Nigeria. And then so we had a phone interview with them where we collected a lot of information about their attitudes and actions related to integration, which I will go through in a minute. And on the interview, we didn't go to them and say, oh, we want to ask you about what you think about NYSC, because all of a sudden they'll remember that they need to obey the clarion call and all of the, NYSC sentiment to be stirred up. We just said we're doing a survey with the university and the university supported us. So we got all of this information from them without compromising the quality of the data. In addition, I had a lot of interviews with alumni, not just from this one university. I'm sorry, there's a typo here. This is what happens when you're making slides late at night. I had a lot of interviews and focus groups with alumni from different universities around the country. I served in 2006, so I did have my own experience, but I wanted to know what other people had done, what they remembered the most, how it impacted them. And so we also had, so it was both quantitative and qualitative, because the qualitative part helped me even in analyzing the results. Okay, so what did I find from all of this? The first outcome is on where people are living now. So one of the goals in the NYSC Charter is that they want at the end of their service year to be able to take up employment in any state. So here, the first outcome is the person living in a non-Yoruba region. Our control group, only 3% of are living outside a Yoruba state. But among those that have served outside a Yoruba state, 17% of them are now living outside. So you can see this is a big jump, right? Because they've served outside once, they are more likely in the future, 7 years later, to still be living outside. Now, we can also see, is it that maybe they retained them in the place where they worked, and so that's why they remained outside, or what's going on? We can change this outcome to see, are they now living in a different state from the state where they served? And we can see that there's still a big jump. It comes down a bit from 17% to 14% that are living outside, but it's not just about people remaining in their state. They've gone to other parts of the country. Now we can also ask, is it that maybe I went to serve in Abia State, I learned how to speak Igbo, and so I just remained in an Igbo speaking state in the Southeast? That is part of it, but even with that, it's still 10% of people who are not living in their in the state where they served, or even the ethnic region where they served. In fact, they've moved all over. And I don't have all these details here, but one of the things that happens, the people tend to move a lot to Abuja. The people that served in the Yoruba state, mostly to Lagos, people that have gone around, they're willing to explore. And from the qualitative surveys that we did, it seemed like people talked a lot about fear of being outside, fear of violence, that somebody was like, anytime before I heard anything north remotely, I didn't even bother because of the fear of the other. But gone, and you've actually had a year there, you have your own first-hand knowledge of, okay, fine, maybe some things are happening, but it's still somewhere where I can see myself settling. So this was the first major result we found, was that people were more likely to be living outside of their own ethnic region. I also ask about knowledge, see how informed they are. So I ask questions, very simple. What is the capital of I give them 3 states. So what's the capital? For instance, one state in the southwest, in the southeast, and in the north, especially the northwest. And I can see how the ratio at which they're giving me correct answers. We have 37% of people that are able to answer correctly in the control group, and this goes up to 50% in the treatment group. And then we also ask again, is it just about the place where they went to? Even the people that maybe they were sent to Abia State, just that act of moving outside of your own region, it broadens you to see even the rest of the country. You know what's going on. So if you're sent to the east, you will still know more about the north as well. And then we ask about the knowledge of the Yoruba states, and there we have no impact because they're both the same. Now, one question that we also ask them is on this sense of national identity and national pride. Does me moving out of my ethnic region, does this shape my national and ethnic pride? So we ask about how proud, so this is on a scale of 1 to 7, how proud are you to be Nigerian? And we actually have quite high levels of national pride. You know, in the control group is 5.2, but this difference is actually statistically significant. In the treatment group, it goes up to 5.7. And then in the same question, but now about ethnicity, how proud are you to be Yoruba? We're also seeing an increase here. And this, I think, was a bit surprising because one can think, okay, you've gone to live somewhere else, you've seen how, you know, the diversity of the country, even the landscape. People talk about when they're traveling, they're like, oh, wow, this is still Nigeria. This is still Nigeria. And it kind of broadens their mind to like the entity that they belong to, that it's not just, you know, what they've known all their lives. So that was the explanation for this national pride. But the ethnic one was a bit, you know, a bit more puzzling. And again, from the different discussions I had, it was this sense that when you are serving somewhere else, especially for people in my sample who are all Yoruba, and they've now moved somewhere else, their own ethnic identity becomes more salient to them. So they will say things like, they will always come, the Yoruba man, like, you know, call him the copper, you know, like you're different, and everything that you do, you're reminded constantly that you're different. And so that reinforces, and I always relate it to how when I was living in Nigeria, I didn't even think of the fact that I was Nigerian very often. But when I moved to the US, that becomes your identity because that's what makes you different from everybody else. And so that reinforces your own identity. That was one thing I found too. And then we have another question that says, if you had to choose between being a Nigerian or a Yoruba, which one would you prefer? And we actually don't see any impact on that. I think because these 2 dimensions of both national and ethnic pride increased, we don't see a difference in this. NYC, you know, I heard this very anecdotally that, you know, they hope that people get married across ethnic lines. And so I asked questions about, have you ever dated somebody that is not Yoruba? And are you married? And I also asked them if they're married. And if they're married, what's the ethnicity of their partner? And we find that people are actually more likely to have dated a non-Yoruba when they've served outside of a Yoruba state. The results on marriage, there's an increase, but few people are married in the sample, so it's not statistically significant. When you break it down, I don't have that here, I actually see that among those that went to serve in an Igbo state, they're more likely to have married an Igbo. So there's something about when you are sent to a specific area, you meet more people from that area, and the likelihood of even marriage happening there is increasing. Okay, so all of this is a very quick snapshot of what I found in this study. The control group are people who also served, so they also had a lot of interaction with other ethnic groups, right? But they were still within their comfort zone. The people that went out, where we're seeing all of these impacts coming from. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a sense of the types of questions. So I think many people would not even think of that as an economics question. But the fact is that it affects welfare when you have all this ethnic crisis and all these issues. These are policy problems. And so once there's a policy issue to be solved, then economists can come in and think, okay, how can we think about different interventions that might help to address the problem? Okay. So, should you do a PhD? I think this is a very big question I get a lot from people. And my answer, like any good economist, is to tell you that it depends. You know, there are different factors that come into play. But I think one thought I want you to shape, which is something one of my professors told me, is that the PhD is really like an apprenticeship. Is like an apprenticeship. Has anybody here done an apprenticeship? Maybe you learned how to sew, or I want to see. Oh, wow, a lot of people here. So you know what it means to have a master trainer? And the goal is that at the end of that apprenticeship, you can become like them, to do the things that they are, and you too can go and train other people. That's really what the goal of the PhD is. And so it's always good to think that these people who are teaching me, these professors, do I want to become like them? The work that they're doing, the research that they're doing, is that what I want my future to be like? And yes, you can work with the PhD in many other careers, you know, that are not research-based, but almost always less costly paths to get to those other jobs. So for instance, I hear people saying, oh, I want to do a PhD so that I can go into government and become like respected policymaker. You know, that's fine. And there's a potential pathway there, but I think things that people can do, the kind of work that they can do without getting the PhD, it's often not worth it. Hello. Is this any better? I don't think so. Is this any better than the old one? I think. Can you make this one louder? Hello. Is this better? Okay, thank you. So I would say, you know, really thinking about, and the reason why I say it's important is that it's a very long process in most schools, especially in the US, the journey to the PhD, you know, so it's an investment that one really has to think about. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not really worth it for any like social status or anything, because at the end of the day, PhD that you're going to eat, you know, you have to think about what your own interests are. So now just thinking about these 3 points here, what are your long-term goals? Usually I advise that unless your long-term goal is to do research, then it's probably not worth it, personal opinion. 2, what are your strengths and interests? What's your skill set? If you're someone where you really don't like math, you don't like to be sitting down and running regressions and numbers give you a headache, then probably not the right path for you. And I think a lot of social pressure we need to really remove from this decision. And then opportunity cost. I've heard many people say that, oh, I actually wanted to do just a master's and I want to go, maybe I want to become like a financial analyst. I want to work in like an investment bank or something like that. But the masters are expensive. However, the PhD is free. In US, for example, it's funded. So I'll rather, in fact, I even heard that they pay you stipend. That, I prefer to go and do that. But as economists, we know the idea of an opportunity cost. There's no free lunch at all. So if they're paying you a stipend or something, you have to think about what would I have been earning if I had done maybe a 1 or 2 year master's, maybe hustled and gotten the money or applied to scholarship. There's some scholarships or masters as well. And then come out and work. So I did a 2 year master's first, and then I did a PhD for 6 years. This means that I spent my 20s in school. Friends will say they're getting married in one place, I should come and buy a dress. I'll say, actually, I cannot. There were so many things I feel like I lost out on because I had no money. That's the honest truth. When you have barely enough to live on, but you are not. Whereas I have friends that's, rising through all the ranks in the corporate world, all of that. But it was because I was completely convinced that this was the path that I wanted to take. So opportunity cost, I always emphasize. And I find that many times people come to me, and by the time they finish talking to me, they say they don't want to do a PhD again. And it's not as if I'm just trying to discourage people, but I just really want people to count the cost well. And so what I did in the first part of this talk was to try and show you that it's really something interesting and exciting. You can use it to study different kinds of topics. And then right now I'm trying to balance it to show that it's really a costly endeavor in terms of your time and your opportunity cost. Okay, so if you're still on the journey and I've not discouraged you, now let's talk about what do you need for a successful PhD application. And the perspective I'm giving is very USA focused because that's what I know the best. I think maybe it's similar to things in Canada. For European schools, I know less. And the first thing I'll say is that, there are many types of programs you can apply to where you come out with a similar type of skill set, especially if you're interested in questions that focus on low and middle income countries, what they call development economics. I feel like when you're in Nigeria, everything is development economics, so I don't make that distinction here. But there's economics, public policy, which is what that's what my PhD is in, social policy, political economy. Many of these are overlapping in terms of what the content actually is. In fact, in my own case, two of my advisors were in the economics department at Harvard. One was in the public policy school, one was in the business school. So it's like I had all this, I was apprenticing with people who were in of these schools, and it was all fine. Now, 3 main ingredients that I've listed here, but there are many online resources. Quantitative skills. I know that especially people that are coming from Africa, what I always encourage people is you want to get as close as possible to 170. That's a perfect score on the quantitative part of the GRE. It is possible. It is very possible. In fact, if you get 169, you drop to like 90 something percentile, which, because there are a lot of people that get the 170. And sometimes it means taking the exam multiple times. But the reason I emphasize is that it really sends a strong signal, and they look twice at your application. They might not know the name of your university. They might never have heard of Nasarawa State University. They might never have heard of where you're coming from. But once they see that, they take a second, third, fourth look. And obviously, even if the 170 is not like 169, 168, but very, very high in that is number one thing, you make yourself to stand out. I know some schools are saying now they don't require GRE anymore. Please, my people, take it, because that's really what helps your application to stand out. Also, advanced math courses. So for instance, you could take some courses online or even in university. In the US, many people that go into economics PhD, actually their first degree is in math. That's what because real analysis, there are a lot of proof-based courses that they want you to take, and that really helps them to feel like you can accommodate and you'll be able to withstand the rigor of the program. Second bucket is research experience. So this could come, for example, through like an undergraduate or master's thesis you've done, just to show that you're someone that can think about a question, think about what data do I need to answer it, and that you're ready to learn and build on those skills. Another major thing people do is research assistantships with principal investigators or professors. And the goal is that after you work with someone for maybe 1 or 2 years, they'll be able to write you a strong letter of recommendation to say that this person actually is very competent, and that tends to open a lot of doors. And for each of these, I'm going to be moving into sharing resources of how that might that process might work. And then the third thing is it's useful in your statement of purpose to show that you understand the economics literature. You can think of some potential gaps that you want to fill and how you can address those. So there are many online tools that can help you in preparing your application. Obviously beyond what I can cover here. I want to just show one example. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to make sure that I can show this. I think I need to share my full screen and not just the specific presentation. Okay. So this again is coming from the American Economic Association, and it's like a Q&A board that they have. How best to prepare a PhD application? What advice do you have? And then different people. So this is Al Roth, who's a Nobel Prize winner. He gives his own advice. There's all these very accomplished people in the field that are giving the advice. Chris Blattman has something. There's a lot of, if you just search online, and you can have a way of looking at, once you look at the person's bio that's giving you advice, it will give you a sense of how much to weight their opinion. So that's something that I really encourage. Okay, so now thinking about specific resources that might support you on this journey. So one is called Graduate Applications International Network, GAIN. Has anybody in this room heard about GAIN? Please, can I see a show of hands? Okay, so just about 3 or so people. So GAIN was started by some colleagues, one of my actually advisors and different people that she works with, and they provide financial support and mentoring for people who want to apply to graduate programs, both masters and PhDs. So what they do is they have a session online. You have to apply to the program, and then they have a session online where they give different, go over the whole application process. Now, based on attendance and performance in that section, they then have a second phase where they pair people with mentors. So I've gone through this twice now, where they assigned me the first time a woman from Ghana, second time a Nigerian woman, where I walk with them step by step. Where's your CV? This is how you should adjust it. Where's your statement of purpose? Who is going to write your recommendation letters? Literally hand holding, because there's so much information that they might not know, thinking about which schools to apply to. So that's GAIN. Second one is Baum Tempers. Baum Tempers provides math training. You know, earlier on I was saying that people want you to know a lot of math. So here is one of their star students who I adopted as a mentee along the way. He cleared ground when you're talking about PhD applications, got a lot of offers from top schools. But it's a 1 year or 9-month program where you're just logging in online and taking all these courses that people take in their first year of PhD programs, because they want you to go there and be ready. And you put that on your transcript as well. People know that you've taken a very serious program. So that's Baum Tempers, math courses. They also give financial support and mentoring. One of my friends helps to run this too, Oyaki. Research in Color Foundation actually started also by a Nigerian woman who is just now in a PhD program. It's been very inspiring to me to see people who are, they're already on, they're still in the journey, but they're already making room for others. So this provides independent research mentorship for prospective applicants. So they mentor you in writing your own research paper in a way that you can present it when you're applying. There's also the MIT MicroMasters program, where you get this, I mean, they call it a MicroMasters in Data Economics and Development Policy. This is also something where if you can show in an application that, oh, I've completed this program, because you give certificates, there's an exam at the end that you take. It's another thing that really makes you to stand out. So as many of these things as you can participate in, both for the funding support, but also the research and mentoring, I encourage that. Okay, so now thinking about fellowships and jobs. Many of these are related to that research experience bucket that I was referring to, like research assistantships. So in my own department at the World Bank, there's something called the Robert McNamara Fellowship, and it's a job. It's actually a very well-paying job, but that also means it's extremely competitive. They bring in people for 8 to 9 months and work on projects with them. So in our RISE team, we just had a McNamara fellow who is just finishing with us now. He was a former ASC Benin student, and he's now doing a PhD in Canada. But this program more and more is trying to target people who have not entered PhDs yet. So it's something to consider. There's the link. If you just search this name, you would find that link. Then in our department, there's also something called DIME, Development Impact Evaluation. They recruit in bulk. So a lot of internships and such term consultancies. And for them, they might even have projects in Nigeria. So it makes it even easier to get in. The World Bank also has an internship program. They offer it twice a year in May and then also in the winter. And there's an application process. This is a bit of a black box in the sense that you just apply, you don't know which specific role you're applying to. And then people who are trying to hire also apply. And then it's the match between the two that is somehow happens. Still worth putting in there and being in the roster of people that are considered. And then finally, there is an Africa region of the World Bank that has a fellowship, and they bring in people for 6 months. We have someone in now as well. So they could either be during their PhD or within 3 years of completion. And they are able to work with researchers. It's this hands-on, getting the real feel of what the work that people are doing. This is not limited to the research department, actually, all across the World Bank. They take in Africa fellows. And so it's really a way of helping people to transition into the work, into the development space. Okay. Finally, the last set of opportunities I wanted to present are for early career researchers. So there's something called STARS at Cornell University. It's structural transformation of African agriculture and rural spaces. So they are the call every year as well. And I've met some people that have gone through this program, really excellent training that they get. Because again, you're working alongside established researchers. How many people have heard of JPAL? Okay, there are a few. It's Poverty Action Lab. They have an African Scholars Program. JPAL was the pioneer, I think, in many ways, of the use of randomized controlled trials in development economics. And so they have a special program for Africans where they're trying to create more opportunities for Africans to be able to lead the research agenda on the continent. And so compared to other people where you have to just submit your application, they review it, if they like it, they take it. For Africans, they give the opportunity that they will work with you to actually develop the proposal together. So you come and I say, I have this idea where I want to see if we provide girls in school with laptops, or we do this or we do that, how would it affect their outcomes? And then they help you to see how can you package this idea you have into a really strong proposal to be funded. And then they mentor you through that and then can fund it. And especially for people who already have their PhDs, this is really targeted to that cohort. And many of you might also know the African Economic Research Consortium, headquarters in Kenya. It's again capacity building, research funding for economists and people in the early part of their careers. Okay, so that's all I have. I don't even know how long I went for. How long did I go for? About 45 minutes. Okay, so let's open up for questions now. And I think maybe one thing I should just add is, I plan to say in the beginning, but I'm just remembering now, is why exactly am I even doing this session? And I think the introduction that Mr. Obina had for the work that ASC is trying to do about making sure that more and more of research that affects Africans are coming from Africa. That's the whole reason why I feel like this type of session is important. I've been in conferences where it is an Africa conference, and you look around the room and maybe there's me and one gentleman that's also looking like he's from the continent. And that cannot continue to happen. And I think even globally, it's almost shame is catching everybody that how can we say that we're gathering here to study Africa and we don't have representation? So this forum is really trying to bridge this gap between very, very bright and talented people in either or yet about to start PhDs or already in the programs, and the global audience, to see how can we build more collaborations and really, at the end of the day, increase this representation of Africans in the global space by providing, as strong as possible training. And that's why I'm happy that ASC is now also here alongside all the excellent universities that are already in Nigeria as well. Okay, so now I'm going to stop so that we can hear the questions that you have and I can try my best to answer as much as I can.
Just put our hands together for our facilitator. Thank you so much. Yep. Okay, so please help us display the online Zoom. So in case we have questions online. So please, who has a question? So we'll just pass the mic to you if you have a question. Questions, please. Please, if you're online also and you have a question, please you can just type out your question. Okay, questions? Okay, please, please raise your hand so I can say it. Okay, let's start from the front, then take it to the back. This one here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma, for the wonderful presentation. It's really impactful and meaningful. Kudos. My question goes to your research topic. Is those exposure to other ethnic groups promote national integration? You know, the problem with, I would say, contemporary economics is that whenever you bring a topic that is more of qualitative, they tend to ask you, those scholars in Nigeria or Africa tend to ask you, how do you measure those variables? How do you measure it? So in this aspect, I would like to know which one are your dependent and independent variables and how do you tend to measure it? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who else has a question? We'll take all the questions at once.
Thank you very much, Ma, for your talk. It was very lovely. Well, I want to ask, based on what you said, you actually made us understand that PhD is good because it advances your research skill and so on. And I wanted to ask, except from the fact that it advances your research, like make you to get more quality in your research skill and everything, what else again does it add? Because from there you actually went into the disadvantages and then you not also how we can actually apply for it and make it possible for us to get this PhD. So that's what I want to add.
Okay, so let's take the question we have online. Precious Emmanuel. Precious Emmanuel, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, thank you. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead. Okay, please mute him. When he's back, we'll continue. Question?
Thank you very much, Dr. Oyebola. My question, or would I say comment, is to pick your brain or hear your thoughts on certain issues that I've observed over time. So just like the first gentleman said, I have friends that are currently studying for their PhD in some universities in Nigeria. I would not mention the name. And then each time they circle back to me to ask some very basic questions, right? And they ask questions surrounding what he mentioned. So for instance, I've submitted a proposal to my director or to my supervisor, and then they're not comfortable with the questions that I intend to investigate. And then they would be like, okay, what is the best way to go about it? How do I go about it? And then in my own little knowledge, I give them advice, but even in the advice I give them, they still aren't convinced as to what I'm saying. So then my question to you would be, given the fact that research ideally should start from undergrad, from my personal experience, most universities in Nigeria do not prepare students from the bachelor's degree program on what best or how best to, transit to either a postgraduate degree program or even to move into research organizations. So there are various research think tanks in Abuja, for instance, that complain each time that whenever they are conducting recruitments for research assistants or research associates, they usually notice that there's a deficit in the capacity of the candidates that they have. So I would like you to maybe shed more light or, advise, I don't know if they're undergraduates here, but then it would be nice for them to hear from you what is the best way for them to build their skills from the undergraduate level, right? I know ASC in Cotonou or ASC in Benin Republic and Cote d'Ivoire has that capacity building right from the first year of undergraduate. But then for graduates, for undergraduate students that are already here, if you can give them advice on how best to start building their skills from school. Thank you.
Okay, questions? We'll take all the questions here before we go online. Any question here? You have a question? Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oyebola, for a groundbreaking presentation. And it's actually, for me, you just opened our eyes to so many of these donor agency. So mine is actually, I have an idea and also a question. So you make presentation, you highlight so many key areas, so many issues, which I thought maybe you, any of your slides, I didn't see anywhere you highlighted the importance of these techniques, what's it called, analysis tools, all these analysis tools, which one is the best? You didn't highlight anything. You didn't say anything about these tools, which one is the best we recommend, so that we know which one is actually the best and how to start engaging ourselves with some of these tools. Then I also have an idea. I don't know if it's fine, I should share it with you here. So if maybe something that we can further collaborate and develop it further that will attract donors. So maybe my idea is where is about this non-state taxation and internal security governance in Nigeria. Often that you see that in some places, non-state have even taken over the taxation, which is seriously affecting our petty businesses, which those petty businesses contribute about 70% to our GDP. So how can we collaborate, or how can we further improve on this? Or maybe we can conduct a research on this. You can see it even at the outskirts of Abuja, where by all these touts are controlling or are collecting tax, are controlling businesses. And you find out the security personnel and the tax collectors, all of them are there, they're not saying anything about all those things. So these are my two, my questions and my suggestions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Doc. It was quite an insightful section. Well, the focus of my question is on the early career paths for the internship opportunities. So I've tried getting into some of these programs like the bank internship, the Robert McMara Fellowship, and a lot of times I've been turned down. And sometimes I think the problem there is because I'm locally trained. I don't know if that's the reason, but someone told me that that could be the reason. If we probably have a foreign certificate, that would have given me a better advantage into some of these fellowships or programs. I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Really want to thank you, Dr. Bola, for that very good session. So my question is, do you think that researchers are appreciated in Africa? Asking that question because even while you were presenting, you made mention about you having to sit in conferences where you have, I mean, conferences where it's supposed to be about Africans, and then you're having just two persons looking like you, or just one person looking like you. And that shows that a lot of Africans don't have interest when it comes to something that has to do with Africa. You see, we have so many Africans doing their PhD, but then researching on things that don't really have to do much about we down here. So they're not even looking forward to helping us develop down here. They're working on somebody else's situation somewhere else outside the country there, and then adding up to develop that person's space, right? So my question is, do you think we're appreciated here? And if you think we are, or if you know we are, and then you have areas where you can direct us to, or maybe programs that appreciates researchers from Africa and how we can be onboarded and then be carried along and find ourselves around there.
Okay. Any more questions here? Questions? Okay, then maybe the questions. We have some questions in line. Okay, there's one more.
or doctorate degree research, I understand that a lot of research work has been done in the universities regarding how to develop this continent, Africa, and even this research work you brought out. But the challenge most at times we face in this part of the world is how to link those researches, domiciles in the university, and the productive part of the world or the government. So like this beautiful research you just did now, your own personal research. So has the government come close to it to see how your recommendations can be implemented and we have a better country in Nigeria? So I think the gap between the research world and the government sector is not there.
Any other questions in the room before we read the ones we have online? Okay, so we have questions online. My first question is, how do I publish in a paid journal for free since I am a student? Secondly, I've done GRE and I have 168 in quantitative and 167 in verbal. How do I use it to gain a fully funded admission in USC or Canada? Thank you, ma. So there's one more question. Okay, how do I start publishing as a research starter? Are there provisions for non-paid paper publishing for students in Nigerian institutions? Then is GRE critical in getting fully funded admission into schools in the USA? Please, are there any other questions before I go ahead? All right.
Thank you very much. These are such great questions. Thank you. I'm glad to see the level of engagement and thoughtfulness that everybody's having here. So this is really great. I'm going to start from the people online. So the question, first of all, any journal that's asking you to, actually, let me think about this. There are things we call predatory journals. Has anybody heard about predatory journals? You know what a predator is? Something that wants to just capture you. So these are journals that are not very good, but they just collect money from people and say, we're going to publish you. So be wary of those and really avoid them. Most journals will have an application, a submission fee. I don't know, maybe that's what you're referring to. And those, I mean, I would say that one thing, even from admission to university or publication, I always advise people to explain that this is who I am. Would you waive the application fee? It's always worth a shot. I think that and I should just be completely honest that I have been I've not been in a position before where I actually had to pay the journal. So I don't really have very good advice on that. But if it's about the application, the submission fee, then that I think it's worth asking them for a waiver. So this is Ade Tomiwa, Emmanuel Ade Shokon. Congratulations, these are great scores. So the next step I think you need to do is to go to either GAIN, so the resources I was mentioning, GAIN, Bound Tempers. Those are the two groups that I think will be your best starting points for helping you to convert these scores into the best PhD program possible. Because with the scores that you have, you are probably eligible for very competitive programs. So being able to learn how to package the rest of your application to be able to enter those programs, these two organizations that I listed earlier will be very helpful for doing that. So I encourage you to do that. Anthony, is GRE critical in getting fully funded? Like I said, if you go on these websites, they'll tell you that no, it's optional, but please take it because that's the best way you can signal the skills that you have. And I'm going to jump now to the question we had over here about technical skills and data analysis. That's really important. I kind of, in my mind, lump them together with quantitative skills where they're quite different. So being able to run regressions and being able to analyze data, you get a data set, you can make sense of it, and you can run some basic analysis, data cleaning. Those are really important skills that you can have now. And most economists use either Stata or R. Those are the two most common ones. R is free, so it's becoming more and more popular, but Stata is also a powerful tool that people use. So those are the two that most people use. and learning how to be proficient in them is really helpful. So for all of these opportunities that I listed here, many of them, for instance, the McNamara, we just did the recruitment for that. The first, you apply, then after they screen the application, before they even interview anybody, they do a data test or an R test. They give you a data set live, and they say, compute X, or answer this question, like how many variables have this, or what's the average of this, or how does this variable relate to that one? So these are skills that are really important for gaining, even for you to be accepted as an apprentice with someone. So the best ways to gain those skills, I mean, there's some online trainings, but I think also getting your hands involved in projects, so either research that you're working on your own. There are lots of guides online of how you, of all the commands and how you use them. And I think having a real project that you're working on is the best way to practicalize these skills. So even places like research centers in Abuja here, ASC obviously is one of them, IPA, they're different organizations, Innovation for Poverty Action is what I mean by IPA, places where you can take what you know and then build on that and improve those research quantitative analytical skills. Let me go to this question on linking research to policy. I think that's really important. And there are two main answers I want to give there. The first one is on the research side, being sure that the quality of the research that we're producing is as high as possible. I think for me, that's one of the things that really guides the work that I'm doing, that if I'm trying to do any project, it's not like maybe I'm an artist and I just want to draw a nice painting and some people can like it, some people might not like it. It's really trying to present something that could affect the lives of millions and billions of people. And so there's a part on the researcher side of making sure the research is actually as strong as possible. And then the second part is then communicating that to policymakers. And so for your question, in fact, that's part of why I'm here on this trip in Nigeria, is really to discuss this paper with NYSC, to say, this is what I found, and then how can we build on it? How can we move forward? So I think most researchers, their goal is that they want it to be influential. So that puts on them the pressure of making it as strong as possible. And then having those inroads. And some policymakers are interested, some are not. You can't force people to be interested in what you're doing. And so I think being able to find people who would listen to you, and it could be, for instance, there's some work that maybe I did in one country, but the same principles apply in other places. Another country might be more interested than the people that I even did it with directly. And those would be the people that I work more closely with. So it's also finding a receptive audience. And this leads to the question about, is research valued in Africa? I'm trying to get do you think researchers are appreciated? So I think that it's a very interesting question. Actually, maybe I should ask them, do you all think researchers are appreciated? No, okay. I mean, we hear a lot about, the university lecturers complaining, salaries not being paid. And there's just a lot that I think it's not as valued as it could be, is my general opinion. And I think the way you know what people value is money. Where are they willing to put money into? So I think that it might also come back to this question about the policy relevance. I think we're moving more and more towards a space in economics where this argument is really being made that if you're a government, for instance, and you're going to spend 1 billion naira on a policy, but you're not even sure that that policy is really going to achieve the goal you want. So isn't it better for you to take maybe 1 million out of the 1 billion? So that's 1%. No, that's 0.1% of it, to run some studies and see the effectiveness of this project you want to test before you now roll it out to everyone. So I think the more and more governments start to think along those lines of prioritizing the funding of research into the policymaking process. I think that that's really what we need. And in some cases, we're moving in that direction already. On the side of individuals as well, I think that I think most people who are doing a research career could almost certainly make more money doing something else. And there's a commitment and a passion that has to drive it. There must be an intrinsic benefit that you're getting from it. When I was at the Kennedy School at Harvard, every year there's a business school right across the street. The number of people that come for MBAs, there are lots. The number of us that are doing policy, either both at the master's or even the PhD, we are not many. So even in the individuals, even we ourselves, we tend to gear more towards things that are more lucrative, which is completely understandable. But this is just to say that it's something for everyone to keep in mind, that there's likely going to be a choice you would need to make about whether to really continue to pursue this research path or other more lucrative opportunities. Okay. Question that you had about opportunities you've applied to and not being successful, is it about being locally trained? I would answer that question by saying it's not so much about the local training, it's about what you can demonstrate that you have learned. In fact, I think that we're getting to the era now where, like this McNamara, it's no American is taken. It's specifically for people who are coming from low and middle income countries. So Asian countries, African countries, Middle East. The way that the tide is turning in many of these institutions like the World Bank is that they're actively looking for people who are coming in from backgrounds that are diverse from the typical things they know. But at the same time, they want people who they can be sure would be able to perform at the level that they need them to. So here's what I'll tell you. I'll say that don't think about your foreign or your Nigerian or local degree as a detriment. Instead, think of it as an asset where if you can show that you can do what other people can do, then it actually brings you up. So that's why some of these other things I'm pointing, like how do you then demonstrate that value? So these, like the MicroMasters, for instance, like the research assistantships that I mentioned earlier, or even the STATA test that they typically give, finding ways, or the GRE even though it's not an admission that you're seeking, if you get a very high score in the GRE, people will look twice and thrice at your file. So just because of the way the world is, they know less about your institution. And like somebody mentioned, that even the institution, if you want to be fully honest, may have given you less training than you really need. And that's just the truth. I went to IFE, so I'm not afraid to mention him. I went to IFE for a year before I went to Dartmouth for my undergrad. And I know what the difference was in the education that we got. My friends who continued, I finished before them because IFE in like the early 2000s had like a whole 1-year strike. So that happened. And then at that age, obviously I'm 100, let me say not 100, but I'm almost sure that things have definitely improved since then. But they were doing regressions by hand where they would, invert the matrix. So there's obviously some deficiencies in our system, if we want to be honest. But what we now have to do is to think about how can I supplement, it's even like friends I had that studied computer science, they had to go and teach themselves all these languages online. So I think in part of being entrepreneurial in the Nigerian education system is to think, okay, this is what they've given me. There's a lot that's good about our system. They teach you how to work hard. There's a lot of rigor. Anybody that succeeds in a Nigerian university will succeed anywhere in the world. So there's a rigor that's inbuilt, but at the same time, you need to supplement with things that you learn by yourself online so that you can show how competitive you are. And once you can show all these things that you can do, you did well on the GRE, you can run regressions, then I would argue that it actually brings your application up to above others. So don't think of it as a downside. Okay, let me continue. there was a question, maybe I should move now to the question about the way to build skills from the undergraduate level. I think that there's some things, even just because of the type of training that many of the people that are faculty now, what they had, and the mode of economics that they are used to. There might be some things like this paper that I even just presented today. Maybe if a student said this is what they want to study, maybe they won't even accept the proposal, right? Because they can say that is not. So it's a bit of a difficult question, because we want you to be at the frontier of what people are doing around the world, the global frontier. But if the person that is training you is not at that frontier, I think it's a bit of a tightrope one has to manage into, like, satisfying them so that they will pass you, but then exposing yourself. So there are some journals that, for instance, the Quarterly Journal of Economics, basically to look, if you can look up these journals, like what are the top economics journals in the world, and read what's coming out of those. That's what will let you know what people are doing globally, where the standards are. And so it's almost like a self-training where you have to read. And some of these journals are gated, meaning they need you to pay. Although some, if you're logging in from a developing country, they would bypass that. There's some working paper series, like World Bank's policy research working papers. You can read those ones for free. And so it's something I really encourage you to look at regularly, to be able to see where this frontier lies, and train yourself in some way online. And then Research in Color was one place of gaining the skills. So each of the programs I listed, they have their different ones. GAIN has its benefits. Baum Tempers teaches you math. Research in Color is actually research projects that you do with a mentor. So that's one avenue that I can think of. Okay. What else does a PhD give you besides research skills? I would say that that's the main thing, at least in my opinion. Again, it's an apprenticeship. If you go to a tailor, it's because you want to learn how to become a tailor. If you go to a PhD, it's because you want to learn how to do PhD level research. Obviously, there are things that come along the way, like your writing skills, even the ability to synthesize information, analytical skills, data skills. But all of them I'm grouping under the broad umbrella of research skills, because the different ingredients of what it takes to write a successful research paper. Policymaker engagement is another thing, because after you finish doing the research, how do you communicate it to people? Okay. And then the question about measuring variables. So in this case, the dependent variables, or the outcomes that I had, were not things that were off the shelf. It was this process of doing all these interviews with people that made me sit down and think, what types of outcomes can this treatment, which is the independent variable, could it have affected? So people talked about things like marriage, it talks about things like their national pride, and also reading the literature. So there are many other papers that have been written on related topics. So it's really starting from what question am I trying to answer, and then thinking about which indicators can help me in answering that. So there's not one measure for national integration, right? So I went at it 2 different angles. Migration is a key part of integration, right? Being willing to move around the country. Another thing I didn't show, some results I didn't show today, was also asking about trust, how much you like people from other groups. If your relative was to marry somebody from the group, would you support the wedding? There are lots of questions that I asked, and I tried to mix both attitudes with actions. So the attitudes are things like ethnic pride, affinity to other groups, and then the actions are things like your migration choices, your marriage choices, your dating choices, so it's a mix of both. So I would say that it's really thinking, and a lot of inspiration comes from papers that are already published, as well as from qualitative engagement with people. Let me see if I did not miss anything. Actually, I think I got all that, you know, I wanted to answer in this broad audience, but these are really great questions. I think maybe my just encouragement is going back to the question of what are your long-term goals, and to really start to dream even bigger about where you could see yourself. And it's not only the PhD that leads to these different pathways, but it is one way. If your goal is to create research that's influencing policy, it's one very important way that could lead, and we need you. I was talking to some of our team last night about how, you know, people who are living in Nigeria, let's take Nigeria as an example, you are the ones that are living here, they're the ones that know the most important issues and problems that are going on. So why is it that the people that are studying these questions are the people in the most influential way? Obviously, there's a lot of research that's been done in Nigeria in local journals as well, but the most influential, if you pick any of these top economics journals, very few Africans publishing there. So this is something that we need to correct. And I think that one of the advantages that you have, because I speak to researchers that are based on the continent, and I tell them that you're the one that knows what's happening. You know, people who are sitting in DC, sitting in Oxford, sitting in California, they don't know what's going on. Even just in the last few days I've been in Nigeria, I'm listening to things on the news that, oh, the new administration is doing this policy or that policy, or this new thing has happened. In my head, my wheels are churning like, oh, this is something that one could really study to see the impact. So finding ways to leverage the knowledge that you have when you do have these either interactions, maybe when through institutions like ASC or CC, that's another partner organization, or IPA, to show the value that you're able to bring, for those of you that are faculty members especially, to not feel that that you don't have anything to contribute, because your very presence here, the knowledge that you have, the networks that you have, the training that you're also having and improving. So I think finding ways to really merge these two, at least when I think about this space, that's where I think that we need to move as a profession. Okay, so I'm going to stop now, but thank you all again for your time and attention.
Okay, let's clap better. We can clap better. Thank you so much. All right. Since we've exhausted our questions, this is where we'll call it quits today. I want us to start by appreciating Dr. Oyebola. Thank you for coming all the way to have this very insightful session with us. Please, how do we express our thanks to her? If we want to clap, let's clap better. And some of us are clapping with a frown. We can smile and clap. Let the clap come out better. Thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate you. And to all the participants, thank you for coming. Many of you have come from far. You've spent hours on the road. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you here. So after this session, we're rounding up here. We'll be going downstairs to have, just put something light in our stomach, something very light, so that you can feel refreshed before we hit the road. So we also have an art exhibition downstairs. Okay, I just want the director of ASC to just tell us very quickly about the art exhibition. So while you're taking something downstairs, you could just be looking at the arts we have. So this is Aisha, our ASC Arts Director. She just tell us ASC Arts we have.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Oyebola, for your session. So when you go downstairs in the hallway, you can see photographs on the wall. So they're an exhibition by photographers that are based in Abuja and also around the world. So it's just in tune with ASE's vision of a holistic African experience and presentation, telling our own authentic stories and connecting them to the world. So there's the description, there are the pictures, and you can also scan the QR code on the walls to get the catalog. So I hope you look at it and you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So please, I'll also urge us, please network, meet with new people, get their contacts. You don't know how far this can help you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Do enjoy the rest of your day.